Hello and welcome to episode number 3 of the BCBC Diaries. We check in with one of our regular players. Had a bit of an adventure last week. He went in with a plan. We'll hear how it worked out trying to qualify for the Breeders' Cup Betting Challenge as part of one of the NYRA bets contests. He's Jackson Muniz. Jackson, how are you?
I'm doing good, Pete. I'm ready. I'm ready for the summer meets to start. We're only a couple days away. I'm ready.
Let's talk about what prompted you to play in the NYRA event last week in the first place.
Yeah, I saw someone had posted on Twitter that NYRA was seeding the tournament with a BCBCC, and it was only a $300 entry, and I right away I'm like, that's probably one I should look at if I have any kind of opinion that day, and turns out I did, and I just decided to play it. Yeah, so we went for it. We started, like I said, I wanted to start in the last race, as you know, most of those contests are won in the last race, and I absolutely hated the race. It was really annoying. It was a maiden race. There was like 2 to 5 horse Chad Brown entry, and so it was bad there. Like, okay, right away, I'm like, I got to try to find something the race before. And luckily, I did have an opinion on. I think it was Capture the Flag was the name of the horse, and he was 92 more in line. I'm like, okay, here we go. We got a nice little price here, and I really wanted to get some. The plan was to get some separation going into the last race because I knew I didn't have any strong opinions in that last race. So I liked having the 9-2 shot, and I wanted to be around 5,000 going into that. So I'm like, okay, if he's gonna be 9-2, how do I turn? I want to bet roughly $1,000 on him at 9-2 to turn that into 5,000, and that was my goal. So how do I turn my $200 entry into $1,000? And I just worked backwards from there. Originally, my plan was to bet the big double, and it was a Linda Rice horse into Legend of Time. The Linda Rice horse scratched the morning of, so I was kind of scrambling there. And then back in the Capture the Flag race, the second choice scratched. So I knew right away he wasn't going to be 9-2 either. He was going to be 5-2, 3-1. I think he ended up going off at 9-5 even. So the morning of, I decided I'm going to do all in on Legend of Time, all in on She's So Pretty, and all in on Capture the Flag. And if those 3 hit, we're going to just kind of see where we're standing going that last race. And that was the plan. And unfortunately, Legend of Time didn't have the best of trips ever.
Don't give it away because we'll roll some tape in a minute
Okay.
here, and I want to hear your emotions as we talk through it. Let me ask a backup question first. Curious how you came up with that goal of the 5,000 to win the tournament. Was that arbitrary? Had you done any research about that? I'm curious where that came from.
Well, I was just thinking, usually the general consensus I've heard from listening to various shows is 10 to 15 times your bankroll. But this was a lower denomination compared. I figured that most of this field is playing in $500 to $1,000 tournaments on a weekly basis. It's more of a lower roller tournament, so I think they're going to be more willing to take some shots at some higher bankrolls there. And again, I didn't have an opinion in the last race, so I really wanted to get some separation between everyone else and force them to try to go for it rather than just being able to bet, $4,000 on the entry in the last race. So that was the thought behind that.
The logic is incredibly sound, and I think the plan was a good one that would have gotten you very, very close to that goal. Definitely, as somebody who's newer to playing in live bankroll events, I mean, these $500 bankrolls, this enabled you to play with optimal strategy. That's interesting. I mean, you didn't seem to have any hesitation about pushing all in and doing what needed to be done a few times. I've heard players say that can be just good sort of muscle memory, and then almost in the big event you're having to add a zero, but it helps you having been through the experience. Do you buy that logic, having been through it?
Yeah, of course. And I've been listening to lots of different shows, especially Matt Miller lately, who's been on a lot, and one of the quotes that really stuck with me was he said, just make it as simple as possible. And it was just like, let's just try to make a 3-horse parlay. And that's, there was a couple other minimums you had to meet, but if 5 horses had won the first couple legs, those would not have come into play. And, it was the second choice, the favorite, and the second choice. So it wasn't that far fetched if, those 3 horses to come in. So that was the plan.
No, of course they have to win.
Yes.
I want you to take us through as we roll the tape with Legend of Time. You can talk a little bit about why you liked him in this spot and take me through your emotions as this one played out on the track.
Yeah, so it was a small field, a 5-horse race, 5-horse field, I should say. And I really thought it was between the two favorites. It was Endlessly and Legend of Time, and I didn't like Endlessly at all. I thought his, the California form's not usually great on the turf, and it doesn't transfer. And he had just been coming out of the Derby, which was not the plan according to McCarthy. He was really against it. So I'm like, you know what? I'm going to take a shot against him. And Buick came out assuming to ride that horse, and that was my shot right there. And he got a pretty good trip overall. He saved ground every inch of the way. And when they came around the turn, he had a little trouble getting out, but he was eventually able to get out. And the pace wasn't that fast, but I think if he was as good as I thought he was, he would have been able to go by those horses in the stretch. And he just wasn't good enough that day, unfortunately.
Hey, you gotta look at decisions, not outcomes, when it comes to all of gambling, especially tournament play. I think you made some great decisions, and sounds like one that, from my point of view, I'd take a very similar shot again. And you just got to get lucky and get these beasts to run like you want them to.
Yeah, you just gotta have the right cards on that day, and that day I didn't, and that's okay. Like you said, gotta trust the process a little bit, and if you keep playing the way I want to play, then eventually, we're gonna get lucky every now and then. You never know.
Jackson, looking forward to talking to you more. Looking forward to seeing your name on the Horse Players Happy Hour leaderboard as well. For folks watching who don't know about that, you sign up to play. It's $20, and then we'll do a live stream. I think we're going to pivot the live stream back an hour. It's going to be 5 to 7 now on Thursdays to capture more of that late Saratoga, early Del Mar action. Jackson, hope to be seeing you very, very soon on the leaderboard, maybe this week.
That's the plan, Pete. Talk to you soon.
He just punched his ticket last weekend over at horseplayers.com. He's Craig Siedler. Wanted to bring you on here to share your experience from last weekend. You qualified, I believe, on horseplayers.com. Any particular stories to come out of that tournament? Any key horses in particular that enabled you to punch your ticket to this year's BCBC?
Just one. Once we made it to the low ratio, about the middle of the card, I was looking for some prices at a spot where I thought other people were going to play some favorites. And I remembered a horse from when we were trying to qualify for the NHC in Texas. And the horse ran second there, had a bad race at Parks, and I was willing to forgive it. And at 13 to 1, that kind of sealed the deal.
A pleasing price for sure to get the job done and get that ticket punched. You said do you play with a partner in these BCBC qualifying events?
Not exactly. Those of you guys who see me play with Michelle Mount, she's been my girlfriend for many years. We don't play together, and I think it'd be hard to say that we do watching our picks. But she was sitting there right next to me, keeping an eye on things.
I love that. What is your history in the BCBC to this point? Is it an event you've played in before?
It's a sad history because I think I've only been in once. Got there, wanted to put it all in at the end of day one, and my horse was a DNF. So I think that was it.
What is the appeal to you of the BCBC? What makes it something that you want to put on your contest dance card year after year?
Well, I'm always trying to make a score, and they're probably few and far between. But anyone that knows me, I'm willing to go home broke every single day I'm at the track. I extinguished my bankroll today at Delaware Park, where I'm at right now. And this is kind of like the ultimate score. So.
Yeah, to win the opportunity to make, $500,000 plus, it's easy to see why that would be appealing. How long have you been a racing fan? How did you get into it?
Probably you wouldn't have me in the game if it wasn't for Arlington Park. So it's just kind of a sad story. I used to go with my dad. So from Chicago, we lived 10 minutes away. And anytime we weren't playing baseball or golf, we were at the track. And it kind of just took off from there, met different people, moved to Las Vegas, and have been spending a lot of time in California at the races. And now it's like something I like to do as much as I possibly can.
I love the sound of that. How about a Breeders' Cup memory from you? Is there a particular Breeders' Cup race from over the years that you have a particular fondness of, whether it was the one that was run at Arlington Park or one of the others?
I was there. I've got a friend, he's now passed away, that got us front row seats right on the wire. and that we won't forget. And I didn't know what credentials were at the time, so when they kept asking us for credentials, I said, I don't know what you're talking about. I think I was 12 or maybe 14. I don't know. Maybe I should have known. But last year was a very good Breeders' Cup year. I think I hit a pick 5 on both days, and I used some of that money to buy a horse that's on the California circuit, half with my trainer Paul Gary Shamrockin. So, and she's won 2 races already this year.
Oh, that's fantastic. Congratulations. Paul does a great job out there under the radar in California. Another friend of mine, Frank Scottoni, has had horses with him and had very positive experience. But what if I held your feet to the fire for one Breeders' Cup race to reflect back on? What would that be?
Oh, I couldn't. I couldn't.
Well, in that case, I'll give one for you since we're talking about Arlington Park. We're going to dig back in the vault. See, I want an excuse to roll some old Breeders' Cup tape on this. How about now? It's a race that lives in infamy in a sense because of long since corrected vulnerability in the tote system. But how about Volponi winning the Breeders' Cup Classic back? You remember that race?
Yeah, but you could never have the pick 6 that day. I wasn't a big pick 6 player, but it was absolutely impossible to have. And I mean, was it Azeri that was there in the first leg of that? And it was like, okay, you could have a shot. And then it was just impossible after that. But that's 20
A
years
lot of
ago.
chaos.
So, I mean,
I remember seeing there was one person in daily racing form in the grid picks. You know, they had 20 handicappers, etc., giving picks that day. There was one person that did have Volponi. That was Karen Johnson, PG's daughter, was able to be a homer enough and see the case and come up with Volponi as the winner of that race. It was extremely exciting. Craig, we appreciate you. We'll have you back for a much longer visit when you get that score. But I appreciate you letting me twist your arm to come on the show today, and we wish you Godspeed in all your endeavors.
thank you for acknowledging that. And when I score, I will be back.
We love to hear it. Craig Siedler will be looking for your name on horseplayers.com and hope that you'll get involved in our horse player happy hour games as well. Next up on the show, we're going to bring in a guest who is very sympathetic to what Craig was saying about Arlington Park. It's a place where he had many, many memorable afternoons. We won't ask him to go too deep down that rabbit hole, however, but we do welcome back one of our regulars this season on BCBC Diaries, on Horse Players Happy Hour. He is the author of A Better Way of Thinking. Learn more at abetterwayofthinking.com. Matt Miller. So the first thing we're going to talk about, and the key thing for the BCBC Diary show, is to ask you about your experience last week at the unique and fun Hawthorne Invitational. At the end of the day, it was Tony Zhou who got the win and won a Breeders' Cup betting challenge seat. Very curious to get your impressions of the event and a little bit of a recap, if you will.
Sure. So this isn't, it's funny, this isn't a plug. This is completely from the heart and sincere. I should probably disclose that Hawthorne was remarkably cool and supportive, bought a whole bunch of the book for people in the contest. So it's yet another reason people are a fan of that place. They try so hard to make people happy. So they had their 2 $500 contests going on for the 2 days. Those are very much a wide open format, no entry fee, total free for all. You can bet just about anything you want. Betting in those tends to be somewhat conservative, although given that they had such a group of killers out there on Sunday, the total ended up being much higher. I think it was Dennis Montoro sitting right next to me that took that one down. But otherwise, the Invitational, I believe it's approximately 60 people. It is by invitation. I do think if some people say no, they have others that they can readily go to. There are plenty of people that have won big events and things like that. But you look around the room and look, I mean, everyone's allowed to have their own feelings and views about themselves. I haven't been doing this long enough to feel quite like I fully belong. And so there's still very much a feeling of looking around thinking how cool it is to see all of these legends around there. And okay, the fact that I had a book to talk about made it kind of fun and kind of amazing that some of them were reading it and asked for signatures or whatever. The contest itself is really a tale of two contests. I don't want it in any way to sound like a complaint. It would be very hard for just about anyone to walk out of that experience unhappy. But I would say that the contest it's a tough puzzle to solve. The first half essentially it holds constant the amount of your bet. They also limit the types of bets so that you can't go to daily doubles, pick threes further out. You can do exactas and trifectas and win bets. So they're limiting some volatility. It has somewhat of an NHC type feel, actually. There's 4 mandatory races. There's 4 optional races. You can pick from a variety of tracks. So again, this harkens back to NHC kind of rules, except it's real cash. You're betting real money on real bets. The room, I think everyone had a bunch of different opinions around what we were trying to do as we got to the last race. We were forced to hold on to $500 for that last race, no matter what. That is very unusual for cash tournaments. There's a lot of people like me that blow it way before then. And so to be forced to stay in it, and as you looked at what it took to win this thing, you very much were still alive with $500, but obviously having more would be super helpful. So as you look at the first half of the contest and try and solve that, I said to a couple people there, I would love to have just seen this thing for about 10 years. I'd love to see how much money the winner typically has going into that last race, what they do with it. This isn't a criticism of my fellow competitors. They do tend to fall shy of my level of aggression. It's funny that I got asked on the webcast at the time. They grabbed, I think it was me and Chris Larmy, and said, okay, pretend you're in first. It's the last race. What do? I told people to brace themselves. It's going to be a little bit uncomfortable, but every single dollar that the leader had, I would have put on my top horse, which came in third. But I was sure to say that's also a $10,000 side bet on the favorite, which did win at 5-2. And so it would have been a nice play. That amount I would have been thrilled to win on the side as much as I wanted. It was cool as hell. They had a title belt. Tony Zhou took pictures of it. It was for people that like to collect things to remind them of good times. It was, yes, they had a more traditional trophy, which was cool, but the belt was nice too. You had everyone playing in that first tranche of the contest. And then next thing you know, everyone's firing like crazy. The result was somewhat formful. So this wasn't like last year when Eddie Olczyk was the only single person in a loud room to still be cheering as they approached the wire. It was the strangest weeding out process audibly I think I've ever heard, that everyone's excited, and then at the end, one guy is still cheering. It was amazing. This year there were actually a lot of cheers, and a lot of, my buddy Brad Anderson, I think, finished in 7th. Everyone kind of taking their shots and trying to figure out what would win. It's not a traditional contest, so telling you that $10,000 and something dollars took it off of a $2,500 bankroll would make this seem wildly different than it was. I don't even know how to describe the total other than to say, I think Tony came into that final race with more than the minimum, and I think he was targeting right around $10,000 with what he had around there. And he made a nice hit, and there were a bunch of people that make nice hits, but his was the strongest. It was the most efficient, and I look, as much as I'd love to win, he's a great friend and he's a terrific champion.
It was definitely a deserved victory. Tony's been in and around these contests. He's had his wins over the year. We were pleased to have him when we did our World Horse Player Tour at the final table, and great to see him taking it all down at Hawthorne last weekend, getting that Breeders' Cup Betting Challenge seat. Matt, we're going to be hearing much more from you, but for now, we'll leave this recap of the Hawthorne contest right here, and we'll be talking soon. We'll be back with more BCBC Diaries soon, and I'll see you on the leaderboard.